Developing concentration in everyday life can be difficult. Very difficult, can't it? We're so stimulated, there's just so much happening in our lives that when we sit down to focus on one thing, our mind just won't settle. It just wants to jump around, doesn't it? Yeah. But if we use specific techniques designed for settling the mind, or we start to understand this pattern of how to develop that concentration in everyday life, we can actually get there quite quickly. Did you notice when we're doing that practice, because we systematically went in, it was actually possible to start building some initial concentration. Your mind started to settle, the thinking started to settle, a bit more spaciousness, not so disturbed by things happening around you. It was easier to follow the breath. If I instructed you go straight to the breathing, and you're coming into the classroom with all that mental agitation, what do you think would have happened? He's just going, no way. Yeah, very difficult, isn't it? It feels like being caught in the surf, doesn't it? In the white water in the surf. But what we did is we used a system of going from a very gross, very easy to feel meditation object, one that doesn't disappear, and then slowly worked our way into a more subtle one that's harder to follow because it keeps disappearing, the breath. The breath is always changing. If we go to these very easy to feel meditation objects at first, we can start to establish some concentration, some mindfulness. And then we slowly move in towards more subtle. So when I teach you these methods, don't rush through each stage of the method. Don't be in a rush to go to the breath. So the first stage, we take our posture and we turn our attention to the feeling of what? No, before that. Heaviness. For heaviness. There's a reason for this. We turn our attention to the feeling of heaviness in our body. So you turn your attention there now. Notice how you've got a feeling getting pulled down towards the earth. Gravity's working on us. Notice how strong that becomes when you turn your attention towards it. It's very easy to feel, isn't it? Very easy. So your first task is to remember the feeling of heaviness. Not just now, but continuously, without forgetting it. It's the continuous remembering that builds the concentration. And what factor of mind makes us remember that heaviness over time? Mindfulness. Mindfulness is the remembering. Remembering what? I am aware of this. So we're remembering, I am aware of the heaviness. My attention is focused on the heaviness. Then if your attention wanders off, if mindfulness is present, you'll notice, and you can bring it back, remembering. When you remember anything over time, you focus on it over time, you experience it over time, without thinking about it, but feeling it, concentration will grow. It will develop. Your awareness will become focused on that. Notice when you're feeling this feeling of heaviness, it sinks down to the feeling of touch, that feeling of hardness. So what you do is you hold that. When you can remember the heaviness over time, the next stage you go down to the feeling of touch, that feeling of hardness. And then you remember that over time. Now the feeling of touch or hardness is about as far away from our head as we can get. Notice when you remember that feeling of touch, your feet touching the floor, your buttocks touching the chair or the ground, yeah? Notice how when you remember that over time, The thinking slows down. It may even stop. You may even experience silence. You see that? Because you're drawing all your energy down. Where your mind sits, your energy goes. Whatever it's sitting on, it goes. If it's sitting on the thought, the thinking is chewing up that energy. Yeah? You bring it down to that touch, the touch is chewing up that energy. The thinking has nothing to feed on. Can you see that? Heaviness, touch. When you can remember that feeling of touch over time without forgetting it, and you find the mind has settled, then you go to the next stage. Whole body. This is a bit more dispersed in attention, so it's harder to remember. But the feeling of your body sitting has an experience to it. It has the heaviness, it has the touch, but there's also lots of different other sensations, isn't there? If you're leaning against the back of a chair, you can feel that. Yeah? If you're sitting on the cushion, you can feel your spine, you can feel the muscles, you can feel that tension, tightness, whatever's there. What you do then is you hold your attention on that and then start to notice any tightness or resistance you've got inside. And notice when you're aware of it, you can feel some, because we're tightening up to life. We're resisting life already, just now. Then what you do is you use long, deep, gentle breaths. Not in the chest, deep down into the belly. And then on the out-breath, treat the out-breath like a sigh. The act of out-breath is always like a sigh. On in-breath, we fill up, we expand, we become tense. On out-breath, we always relax. So we use that to our advantage. As we breathe out, relax into your body. You'll feel your body starts to get heavier. But as this is happening, noticing you're becoming more and more present. Now the relaxing, the letting go at this point through the breathing starts to develop the concentration. Concentration isn't about gaining anything, it's about abandoning. So relaxing into anything is putting it down. It's not fighting against it anymore. And you can use this with pain, you can use this with discomfort. Relaxing into it. As you relax down, your body will get heavier and heavier. You'll become more and more present, more and more still. And then what will appear to you will be mental tension, mental tightness, usually from putting in too much effort. We like to put in effort, don't we? Yeah? In this society, if we don't put in effort, we're accused of being lazy, aren't we? So we're brought up effort, effort, effort. It's interesting, when you go to Myanmar, Burma to meditate, the teachers are effort, effort, more effort, more effort. But they're dealing with a culture that's very, very relaxed, very, very laid back. But then when Westerners go over there, we go over with our effort mentality and they say effort, oh, effort, okay. Oh. And we put in too much effort and we tie ourselves up in knots. But if you watch them meditate, they move around meditating with this gentleness, this grace, this relaxation. So we actually have to go the opposite way. I have to tell you, less effort. Your effort is just to remember, I am aware of this. This is how I'm relating to this. That's the only effort you need to put in. Does that make sense? So notice that mental tension usually appears behind the eyes, forehead, inside your head. Then use the long, deep, gentle breaths and relax into that. So notice if you do it now, breathing in, breathing out, mentally relax. You feel the change already? In and out. So you're being mindful of mentally relaxing. You're holding your mindfulness on that. As you do that, you'll sink deeper and deeper into concentration. Your awareness will become more concentrated, more focused on that relaxing into. And you'll feel yourself sink deeper and deeper. Your mind will become more and more still. Keep doing this stage until the mind is silent. No more chatter, no more discussions, no more wandering. When that happens, and only then, allow this controlled breathing to come to an end. As you get more skilled, it will come to an end by itself. It will just naturally become slower and disappear by itself. At this stage, your concentration is deep enough, you are through the white water. The hindrances are suppressed. Hindrances to meditation are suppressed. What you do now is just sit and watch. And as you do, in this relaxed state, the breathing will appear to you. Notice you don't make yourself breathe. It will appear. How it appears doesn't matter. It's fast, it's slow, doesn't matter. It's at the nose, it's in the abdomen, it's in your back, it's in your leg, it's in the other room, it doesn't matter. Your task is just to be aware of that which tells you that you are breathing. Yeah? At this point, you can use a label, in as the breath comes in, and out as the breath comes out, to point your attention. That's all you need. Saying, I'm looking at this breath, this in breath, this out breath. Start to notice in particular, as you feel the length of the breath, what tells you it is an in breath and what tells you it's an out breath. So first thing that tells you it's an in breath might be the coolness. Yeah, coolness at the tip of the nose. You might feel pressure at the back of the head. Movement. Expanding. What tells you an out breath? You'll feel falling, movement. You may feel pressure and warmth at the tip of the nose. There's these changing sensations. Your task is to know them from the beginning to the end. Keep following, don't forget them. In this first stage of meditation, ignore all distraction. If your attention wanders to a sound, to a thought, to an itch, whatever it is, acknowledge it and come back to the breath. This is important. The reason is because we're developing concentration first, mindfulness second at this stage. And to develop concentration, we have to be aware of something continuously over time, without a break. As the concentration grows, you'll find your attention will stick to the breath and it won't wander off anymore. Watching the breath will be easy. Your mind will become more and more still, more and more clear, and you may even become quite blissful. Yeah? Or feeling very, very pleasant. This is as much concentration as we need for mindfulness practice. We don't want to go any deeper. If we go too deep into concentration, we'll start to no longer experience things. Hearing will disappear. The feeling of our body will disappear. All the different 5 sense doors will start to disappear till only the mind door is left. Yeah? We don't want to go that far. Yeah? So does that make sense? That first one is to build that initial concentration. In understanding stage 2, I'm going to explain how it works. In stage 2, we swap from here into mindfulness practice. Yeah? So we're going to be developing mindfulness over concentration. And we want a specific type of concentration. It's called Kanika Samadhi. It's momentary concentration. It's a flexible concentration that isn't fixed on one thing, but a concentration that can actually move quite freely. This is important. The way we do this is, as you're watching the breath to trigger stage 2, what you do is you particularly start to pay attention to the very moment the breath begins and the very moment it ends. You want to look at the beginning and the end, because what you want to do is go from viewing permanence to viewing change. Yeah? You want to watch change. It's change that actually allows momentary concentration to develop. It's the change. Can you see the difference between just watching the whole breath, now watching the beginning and the end? When you start doing that and you relax your grip on the breath, right? Eventually in the gap, your attention will move. You will forget the breath. Your mindfulness might lapse. When your attention moves, your task then is to know when it's moved. Yeah. So if you're watching each breath come in and out, you're watching the beginning and the end, and your attention suddenly moves to, say, a thought, you can notice, when you notice that you've been off thinking, even if you've been lost in it, the moment you notice you're off thinking, just use a label, thinking, right? When you do that, you'll get a separation from the thought, and generally the thought will just dissolve and disappear. See what it feels like, the difference between when that thought was present when you were lost in it and when that thought's no longer there. This is important. What does it feel like? What does it taste like? When you know that, come back to the breath. If a particular thought is persistent, your attention goes to it, you can change the label. It might be arguing, it might be remembering, it might be planning, it might be discussing or telling. Whatever the emotional charge behind the thought is, try to see if you can notice it. What's driving this thought? You'll see there's a general theme. What you're thinking about isn't important, but what's important at this stage is what's driving it. What's the emotion behind it? If I'm arguing, it might be driven by irritation. Yeah? If I'm remembering, it might be driven by a fantasy. I might be fantasizing. It might be the pleasure behind it. Or it might be that I don't want to forget something in the future. Notice there's some charge. If there was an emotional charge, your attention would not go to it. Yeah? So identify it more clearly, then come back to the breath, in, out. So you stay with the breath as your home base, and then when you forget the breath, because that's your home base, because you're becoming familiar with it, the breath and your body, you will notice when your attention moves. Because you'll notice, because you'll no longer be remembering the breath or the body. Can you see how this works? Yeah, and you'll start to see movement of your attention and get to understand what's going on. You're watching the breath, it goes to a sound. Hearing. When you go to a sound, notice. And this is the same to anything when it wanders to anything, but we'll use sound for an example. If the sound had a neutral feeling, your attention would not go to it. Your attention is going to the sound because you either find it pleasant or unpleasant. If it was your favourite song, you couldn't hold your attention off it because you want to listen to it. Why? Because it has a pleasant feeling when you hear it. Your task is not to notice what the sound is, but to notice that pleasant feeling. Yeah? If you didn't like the sound, this sound, I wish it would go away so I could meditate, it will have an unpleasant feeling to it. Your attention is actually aversive to it. It wants to push it away. Notice the hindrances are coming back. Yeah. What you do is you notice that unpleasantness, not the story about, I wish that mother would control a child more so she doesn't disturb us. Don't they see there's a sign out there saying it's a meditation class? Yeah, that story, you know that one. But driving that thought, driving that anger is an unpleasant feeling. Feel the unpleasant feeling, feel the pleasant feeling in everything. And itch comes up. Why do you have to scratch it? Because you find it unpleasant and you want it to go away. It's aversion, it's anger. The funny thing is, if you don't scratch an itch, it goes away by itself. Yeah, see? So what we want to do, the idea of this practice, we build up that initial concentration, and then we start to notice when our attention moves, why it moves. And it moves because we find something pleasant or we find it unpleasant. The Buddha called this Vedana. It's the feeling tone or it's the flavour that permeates all experience. It's either a pleasant flavour or an unpleasant flavour. And we like tasting things. We like to taste things. Once you discover this pleasant or unpleasant feeling tone, your only task then is to relax into it. Go back to the relaxing into it. Oh, unpleasant. That's that taste. Relax into it. Pleasant. Watch how hard you don't look. Watch how strong the desire is not to get rid of pleasant feeling. We get addicted to it. Relax into it. Notice what happens when you relax into these flavors. The response, the desire to respond, to act on, to be driven by, goes out of that. Because what you're doing is you're relaxing into your relationship to it. And so you're relaxing in that desire to respond, to act. So the pleasant feeling doesn't drive you to react. Yeah? Did I say pleasant or unpleasant then? The unpleasant feeling doesn't drive you to move away from it. Yeah? You relax into it. In doing this, you start to change your relationship to pleasant or unpleasant. Yeah? And this starts to bring the mind towards what's called equanimity, which is a maturity in the practice. It's a sign of mature practice, where the mind is no longer attracted to pleasant or driven away from unpleasant. Within this equanimity is very, very deep contentment and a very subtle, blissful happiness. That's a different type of happiness that you can get anywhere else. This happiness is unchanging because it's based on giving up, not on gaining. This is why it's a different type of happiness. So it's a happiness that stays with you all the time, as long as you're equanimous, as long as you're not grabbing onto something. The problem with mentally grabbing onto things is we grab onto things we have no control over. Every experience you have is changing. If something is giving you pleasure, one day it will leave. 100%. If something's causing you pain, one day that will go too. Everything is coming and going. You see that in the meditation when you're meditating. Yeah? It's always changing. So if we try to find that, chase after that pleasant feeling and run away from the unpleasant feeling outside of ourselves, it's always doomed to be temporary. There's nothing wrong with enjoying pleasant things as long as you know that they're going to go. Enjoy the beauty of the flower. One day it's going to be the compost. It's going. It's on the way out straight away. My brand new car, one day it's going to be the rusty heap at the tip. Everything's like this. So understand this. Enjoy it, but don't get attached to it. So it doesn't mean you don't feel pleasantness anymore. You feel pleasantness, but you don't have the stickiness. So the relaxing into is relaxing into that stickiness to do with that. So can you see the stages? First stage, concentration. Second stage, allow the attention to move and follow it. Notice where it's moved to. Notice the relationship to that. See if you can taste the flavour of pleasantness or unpleasantness. Relax into that so you change your relationship to that pleasant or unpleasantness and watch what happens. That's how you do this practice.